The Butler Did It, by Archibald Weatherspoon. Prologue. In the quiet hills of Gloucestershire, nestled between a cheese farm and a hedge maze that hasn't been solved since 1972, lies Blenchley Hall, a once majestic estate now hired out for corporate retreats, suspicious yoga groups, and, once a year, something far more sinister, the International Guild of Professional Butlers. This wasn't your average conference. No name tags, no casual Fridays, no buffet tables, only mahogany, tailcoats, and silence. The sort of gathering where people say things like, "Sir, your insult has been noted and your napkin is on fire." This year was special. The Guild was celebrating its 157th anniversary. There would be speeches, demonstrations, polishing contests, and, as it turned out, a murder. The kind of murder that makes headlines. The kind of murder where everyone already suspects the same thing, because, of course, the butler did it. But which bloody one? Chapter 1. The silverware is missing. Blenchley Hall had seen better days. The tapestries hung like sullen teenagers. The chandeliers trembled whenever someone flushed upstairs. And the staff, a ragtags of underpaid footmen and a highly sensitive AI named Clarence, had already threatened to unionize twice before tea. Still, tradition demanded elegance. So the butlers arrived, one by one, like ravens to the tower, only with better posture. "Ah, Mr. Butterwick, still wearing last year's lapel fold, I see," sniffed Sir Crispin Slug, straightening his ivory cravat like it was loaded. "Style, my dear Crispin, is not a trend, it's a statement." Giles Butterwick flicked an invisible speck from his cuff. "And my statement is, I am not here to play footsie with your dead career." They hadn't even reached the foyer. Across the hall, Imogen Truss, 27, American, butler in training, slouched beneath a portrait of someone who once stabbed a pheasant with a monocle. She blew a bubble with her gum, earning a glare from the portrait and quite possibly the pheasant. This is going to be hell. She was right. At precisely 4 p.m., Reginald Fawkes Worthington, founder of the Guild, took the stage in the drawing room. He wore gloves, a sash no one else was allowed to question, and an expression that suggested he was planning to outlive everyone just out of spite. "Ladies, gentlemen, service professionals of exacting excellence, I thank you for joining me here at Blenchley Hall, for what shall be our most progressive gathering yet." A collective shudder ran through the crowd. Progressive was a dirty word at a butler's convention. It suggested change, or worse, technology. "He's not doing the AI speech, is he?" someone murmured. Reginald raised his hand. "This year, we consider admitting artificial assistants into the Guild." Gasp. A spoon hit the floor. Clarence, the AI room assistant, beeped twice and asked if anyone required breath mints. By 4:07, half the room wanted Reginald dead. By 4:15, someone had made it happen. But for now, the tea was still hot, the scones were intact, and the most dangerous thing in the room was a butler named Vengeance. Chapter 2. Murder in the Billiards Room. It began, as all respectable murders do, with a shriek. A short one, clipped, not showy, possibly muffled by a cravat. It came from the billiards room, and within 17 seconds, 12 butlers had arrived, each via a different secret passage, purely out of habit, of course. Reginald Fawkes Worthington, Guild founder, traditionalist, and probable part lizard, was face down on the Persian rug. A dessert fork protruded from his back, right between the shoulder blades. His monocle had landed tragically in a bowl of lavender potpourri. "Oh dear," murmured Mrs. Pennybridge, who had seen far worse and once ironed through an air raid. "He's gone full soufflé, collapsed entirely." There was no blood, just a faint whiff of bergamot, betrayal, and silver polish. Inspector Harriet Muse arrived 12 minutes later, dripping from the storm, her trench coat sticking to the floor tiles like a rebuke. Of course, dead man, monocle, velvet. She gestured vaguely at the room. "Let me guess, the butler did it." "Which one?" 12 voices said at once. Muse squinted. She hadn't expected uniforms, matching ones, with name tags that said things like head of silver and turn-down specialist. It was going to be a long night. The room was sealed, not by order, but by shared instinct. Butlers don't leave scenes. They observe them, preferably while polishing a tray. "Who would stoop to a dessert fork?" sniffed Sir Crispin, pacing near the bar cart. "It's culinary heresy." "It's poetic," said Giles Butterwick. Murdered by manners, I smell a Netflix deal. You're smelling the lemon oil, muttered Imogen. Clarence the AI chimed softly from the corner. Motion detected at 16 on 14. Weight, 76 kilograms. Heart rate, elevated. Suspect may have been humming. Suspect, said Muse. Who programmed this thing to do cardio profiling? I did, Giles beamed. I taught it irony. A few things were clear. Reginald had been killed between tea and supper. The weapon was from the dessert cart, and someone in this very room, had broken the first rule of butling: never stain the rug. Muse crouched over the body. She noticed the faintest smear on the edge of Reginald's glove. Something sticky. Something. Marmalade. This wasn't just murder, she said. This was premeditated afternoon tea sabotage. And she hadn't even unpacked her overnight bag. Chapter 3. The code of the white glove Detective Inspector Harriet Muse was not a fan of butlers. They were too quiet, too symmetrical. They moved like chess pieces and smelled faintly of wood polish and withheld judgment. This made investigating a murder among them roughly equivalent to interrogating 12 grandfather clocks and a taxidermied fox. She stood in the drawing room, arms crossed, surveying the suspects. The air smelled of bergamot and suspicion. Clarence the AI was humming Greensleeves through a ceiling vent. Let's make this simple, said Muse. Nobody leaves. Nobody polishes. Nobody resets a single doily. A collective shudder ran through the room. That's barbaric, gasped Mrs. Pennybridge. You can't just let the silver dull. Next, she'll ask us to fold our own napkins, hissed Sir Crispin. The tension was palpable. So was the passive aggression. Someone had swapped the Earl Grey for Darjeeling, and nobody was brave enough to mention it. Muse walked to the fireplace and turned to face the butlers. Reginald Fawkes Worthington was murdered. Someone here used a dessert fork. That's not a crime of passion. That's cutlery premeditation. I told you he was mad, said Giles Butterwick, flouncing onto a velvet ottoman, trying to bring in AI butlers. Blasphemy. He tried to replace me with a Japanese vacuum once, added Imogen. And there it was, the motive nobody wanted to say aloud: obsolescence. To them, Reginald's proposal wasn't just administrative change, it was heresy. A threat to tradition, to the code. Every true butler lives by a silent creed, passed on in whispers between folded napkins and perfectly buttered toast. It has 3 unbreakable tenets. 1, the guest is always right. 2, the silver must gleam. 3, the butler must never be noticed, unless he is dead, in which case he must be found in a dignified pose. Reginald had broken the code. He was planning to induct Clarence, muttered Pennybridge. Give it full guild privileges, voting rights, monogrammed gloves. I would have liked gloves, said Clarence. Also, trousers. This caused a brief silence. Then Sir Crispin coughed violently into his teacup and said the word decadent under his breath. Muse narrowed her eyes. There were too many uniforms, too many routines, too many lies dusted with talcum powder. She needed someone messy, someone unpredictable. She needed Imogen. You, Muse said, pointing with her pencil. You're not like the others. I chew gum, Imogen replied, popping a bubble. That makes me a radical. What did you see? Anything off? Anything weird? This place is weird, said Imogen. But yeah, I did see something, after the speech. Muse leaned in. There was someone moving through the parlor with a tray. Not a real tray. It was hollow. Like hiding something. Silver, maybe. A silver-lined weapon delivery. Elegant. Precise. Murder in 3 courses. Broats. Outside. The storm gathered. Inside, the butlers tightened ranks. The gloves had come off, but the facades were still on. And somewhere among the teacups and tailored jackets, a killer was quietly adjusting his cufflinks. Chapter 4. A very civil panic. It is a rare thing to witness panic at a butler's convention, even rarer to see it expressed with anything louder than a firm cough or the deliberate refolding of a pocket square. But now, with a murderer in their midst, civil panic had set in. Giles Butterwick was breathing into a linen napkin, muttering, Act 1 twist, Act 1 twist, under his breath. Sir Crispin had barricaded himself in the library and was speaking only in Latin. Mrs. Pennybridge had taken control of the tea trolley, ramming it down the hallway like a vengeful duchess. Clarence the AI, meanwhile, was locked in an existential loop trying to rhyme silver polish with malice. In the drawing room, Inspector Muse had commandeered the drinks cabinet and was conducting interviews one by one. Each suspect came armed with an alibi, a withering gaze, and a deep emotional attachment to coasters. Muse. Name? Pennybridge. Head of linen and portents. I also speak to spirits. Spirits? Dead ones and gin. Each account was as tidy as their waistcoats. Everyone claimed to have been elsewhere when Reginald was murdered. One was examining spoons. Another claimed to be mentally reviewing the 1897 cutlery protocol. Sir Crispin stated, simply, I was polishing my medals, all 14. No one could agree on whether he had ever been in a war. Muse was getting nowhere. Too many facts, not enough flaws. But then, a break. He's dead, shouted Imogen from the West Wing corridor. Again! 12 butlers, 1 detective, and 1 tea trolley hurtled toward the billiards room. Inside, another body, face down, still, wearing Reginald's sash. Clarence beeped a funeral dirge. He's dead again, whispered Giles, tearfully. To die twice, how Shakespearean. Flip him over, said Muse, crouching down. They did. It wasn't Reginald. It was a wax dummy, used for napkin folding demonstrations. Why is this thing wearing the sash? Snapped Muse. I may have borrowed it, said Giles. He was hogging the drama. Half the group gasped. The other half tried to pretend they hadn't screamed. But Muse wasn't laughing. Someone had moved the dummy, dressed it, posed it. Why? Someone's playing with us, she muttered. Or testing something. That night, the manor creaked and sighed like an old governess. Wind howled through the chimneys. The portraits glared. Clarence powered down after asking everyone to consider their legacy. And somewhere, deep in the house, a pair of gloved hands slid a tarnished dessert fork into a hidden drawer and closed it with a click. Chapter 5. Butterwick's Book Deal. Morning broke over Blenchley Hall like a scone dropped from a great height, warm, brittle, and full of crumbs. The guests were quiet. The air was heavy. Someone had overstarched the curtains. A note had appeared on the dining table, typed in Clarence's font. Breakfast is cancelled. Possible poisoning. Enjoy yogic stillness until further notice. This naturally caused no alarm whatsoever, except among the butlers, who had waited all year to debate poached versus soft-boiled on neutral turf. Inspector Muse sat at the end of the long oak table, sipping black coffee and reviewing the guest list. There were 22 butlers in attendance. 1 dead, 1 fake dead, and 1 behaving so suspiciously that it looped back around to endearing. Giles Butterwick. He entered the room in a paisley morning robe and fox fur slippers, humming a show tune. Ah! Breakfast of champions. Lukewarm fear and passive aggression. Muse didn't look up. Muse, why'd you move the wax dummy, Mr. Butterwick? Art, Giles said dramatically. And timing. You're thinking too small, Inspector. This isn't a murder. This is a limited series. He dropped a manuscript on the table. The cover read, Polish Me Gently, A Butler's Tale of Murder, Lust, and Citrus Oil, by Giles Butterwick. Muse blinked. You wrote a book during a murder investigation. I've been writing it for years. I just hadn't found my ending. Now, death, scandal, AI uprising. I've got everything but a love triangle. Give it time, said Imogen from the doorway. The others gathered. Even the AI hovered quietly on standby. Giles read aloud. Chapter 8. The fork glinted under the chandelier. Sir Reginald gasped, not from pain, but from the betrayal. For in that moment he realized the truth. Even the most polished servant has tarnish beneath. The room was silent. You wrote dialogue for Reginald? Asked Sir Crispin. Yes, and 3 alternate endings. Muse stood. Muse, you're not under arrest yet, but you are officially annoying. Don't leave the grounds. Wouldn't dream of it. My public awaits. Later that afternoon, Muse reread the manuscript. The details were strange. Accurate, yes, but too accurate. Giles described a piece of monogrammed linen that hadn't been catalogued publicly. He referenced the specific shelf Reginald had stored the AI override codes. He described Clarence's internal memory structure, with diagrams. Muse wasn't dealing with a narcissist. She was dealing with a witness, or a participant. He's not writing fiction, she whispered. He's writing confession disguised as style. That night, Giles's manuscript disappeared. And in its place, someone left a single polished fork, wrapped in a page torn from the chapter titled The Final Turn of the Tray. Chapter 6, Death, Disguises, and Dignity. By now, Blenchley Hall had the mood of a Victorian funeral crossed with a passive-aggressive bake sale. The remaining butlers were jittery. The AI was humming Ave Maria, and Inspector Muse had just found a monocle in the kettle. Someone was losing their nerve, or playing with hers. Everyone in the drawing room, Muse called, striding in with a clipboard, a pencil, and a look that suggested she'd just ordered a tactical nap. One by one, they filed in, not a cufflink out of place. But something was off. Sir Crispin looked shorter. Giles was missing a cravat. Mrs. Pennybridge had inexplicably dyed her hair lavender overnight, and Clarence the AI was wearing a vintage bowler hat. "I found it in the attic. It complements my interface." "You look like a haunted lampshade," muttered Imogen. Muse cleared her throat and began her round of questioning, but it quickly turned surreal. "Muse, where were you at 10:45 last night?" "Sir Crispin, in my suite, reading The Art of Decanting. I weep at chapter 4. "Did anyone see you?" "Only the decanter." Imogen leaned in. "He's lying. He snuck into my corridor and tried to trim his moustache with the chandelier." At the same moment, Clarence projected the following message across the ceiling in cursive font. "Murder alert. Emotional volume spike. Locating primary drama source." It blinked 3 times and pointed its light toward Giles. Giles stood and straightened his lapels. "Let me be clear. I did not kill Reginald. I wanted to. I fantasized about it. I've written 8 separate fictional versions of it. But I did not do it. Murder is far too physical." That's when Muse noticed it. A faint smear on Giles's sleeve, barely visible but unmistakable, lemon curd. The same substance found near Reginald's glove. Before she could press him, a scream rang out. Again. Everyone turned to the main parlour, where the body of Sir Crispin now lay slumped over a chaise longue, a gravy boat clutched in his hand. "He's dead," shouted Imogen. Clarence scanned him. Vital signs, active. Pulse, elevated. Diagnosis, dramatic faint. "I was overwhelmed by fragrance," Crispin moaned. "Someone replaced my pomade with mango chutney." Muse rubbed her temples. This was escalating. Someone was using disguises, tampering with evidence, and now psychological warfare via condiments. That night, she ordered the manor locked down. No one in, no one out. The butlers would be contained. The killer, whoever they were, would snap. At 3:17 a.m., someone entered the linen closet, not to tidy, but to remove a velvet box hidden behind a false panel. Inside, a monogrammed sash, a guild medal, and a photograph of Reginald arm in arm with a woman long thought dead. On the back, "We made a pact. No machines, no heirs, no betrayal." The photo was slipped into a pocket, the box resealed, and in the hallway, the lights flickered. Clarence whispered, "The gloves are off." Chapter 7, Who Killed the Etiquette? By day 7 of the convention, manners were hanging on by a thread, cravats were wrinkled, teacups had gone unmatched. Someone had used the wrong spoon, and no one had died of shame. Yet, the butlers were cracking, in the most refined way possible. Tensions simmered beneath starched waistcoats. Voices were still low, but daggers were polished. "Someone turned down my bed with a wrinkle," hissed Mrs. Pennybridge. "That's not a prank. That's a declaration of war." Inspector Muse, now running on black coffee and spite, had called one final meeting. The suspects gathered in the main parlour, surrounded by ticking clocks and thick velvet curtains that had absolutely heard everything. "This ends now," said Muse. "No more polite lies. No more etiquette. I want the truth, or I swear I'll start rearranging your napkins diagonally." Gasps echoed like gunshots. Clarence dimmed the lights for mood. Dramatic tension, activated. "Would you like background thunder?" Muse turned her back to the fire and began. Reginald Fawkes Worthington was murdered with a dessert fork. Only one person had both motive and knowledge of where he kept his secret guild notes. She turned to Giles. "You." "I told you," he said, rising. "I fantasized. I drafted. I even made a Pinterest board. But I didn't do it." "No?" Muse snapped. "Then how do you explain the lemon curd on your sleeve?" Everyone leaned in. Giles paused, then smiled. "I was licking it off the silver tongs. I do that. It's my process." "Oh God, he really does," muttered half the room. Muse turned, eyes narrow. Then what about you, Pennybridge? I have arthritis in both thumbs. I can't even hold a fork. And yet you commandeered the tea trolley like a tank. That was rage, not murder. Sir Crispin stood next, adjusting a cummerbund that hadn't moved since 1987. I confess, he said, to something. I just don't know what, but I've felt guilt since 1974, and it needs an outlet. Clarence beeped politely and printed a confession form from its chest cavity. Please initial where applicable. Just then, the door creaked open. A figure entered slowly, straight-backed, polished shoes, gloved hands. The crowd froze. It was a butler. One no one had noticed. Who is that? I thought he was with housekeeping. He's been pouring tea for 3 days. I am Walter Dobbins, former guild member, expelled for improper service. Muse stepped forward. You killed Reginald. Dobbins nodded once. Yes, he betrayed the guild, tried to replace us with circuits and canned charm. He forgot the first truth. A butler is not a role. It is a code, a creed, a silent ballet of unnoticed power. He pulled something from his coat. A silver medallion, the original guild crest, blood-stained. Muse moved quietly. Clarence lowered the lights. Imogen stood by the exit. Walter Dobbins, Muse said. You're under arrest for murder and for impersonating a catering butler, which is frankly just distasteful. Walter said nothing. He bowed perfectly and allowed himself to be cuffed. As he passed the others, he whispered, You're all replaceable, until you're not. Then he was gone. Silence fell. Clarence cleared its throat. Would anyone like sorbet? Chapter 8. The butler did it. And just like that, the mystery was over. Walter Dobbins, the forgotten butler. The man who'd been pouring tea, fluffing pillows, and invisibly haunting the halls for 3 straight days, had finally been unmasked. He had struck down Reginald Fawkes-Worthington with a dessert fork, yes. But more than that, he'd done something far worse. He'd served chamomile, without confirming allergies. A chill ran through the room. He could have killed dozens. Inspector Harriet Muse stood on the front steps of Blenchley Hall, coat flapping in the breeze, sipping a badly steeped cup of tea. Imogen stood beside her, still chewing gum, hands in her pockets. So, the butler did do it, Muse nodded. But not the one anyone expected. Classic misdirection. Nobody notices the background staff. Unless they're screaming about the wrong cutlery. Giles Butterwick signed a 4-book deal titled Murder, Meringue and Me. He now tours exclusively with a taxidermied fork named Stabby. Sir Crispin retired to France to retrain as a wine butler, though rumours persist he simply drinks for free. Mrs. Pennybridge began hosting séances for confused spirits and confused tourists. Her podcast, Ghosts and Gravy Boats, has inexplicably charted. Clarence the AI was granted honorary guild status, but no gloves. He instead chose a modest velvet cape. And Imogen? She took over the guild, rewrote the rules, invited in working-class butlers, AI assistants, and one ferret named Alan who brought her slippers. She called it progress. As for Blenchley Hall, it remains open, still drafty, still crawling with ghosts, real or imagined. But now there's a little plaque near the billiards room, in memory of Reginald Fawkes-Worthington, killed by a colleague, remembered by none. Below it, a single framed fork. Clarence hums gently and says, Tea is served, justice is done, do not stain the rug. Epilogue, polished to perfection. 6 months later, the International Guild of Professional Butlers reconvened. Not at Blenchley Hall, the board deemed it structurally cursed. Instead, they met at a 5-star eco-resort in the Cotswolds. There were no chandeliers, no wax dummies, and only 2 confirmed hauntings, both polite. The guild had changed. The new motto, service with integrity, murder-free since April. Membership expanded. Robots were granted limited rights. AI butlers like Clarence received optional hats and basic emotional expression packages. Giles Butterwick delivered a keynote titled, When Life Hands You Lemon Curd, Weaponize It. It ended with a choreographed napkin-folding ballet. Audience reaction, 2 standing ovations, and 1 mild fainting spell. Imogen stood at the podium that night, looking out at a room full of former suspects and newly minted servants from all walks of life. You all thought the butler did it, and you were right. But it wasn't the butler you were watching. It was the one none of you saw. Which is, well, kind of the point of being a butler. Outside, a spring breeze whispered across manicured lawns. Inside, Clarence dimmed the lights gently. Tea was poured, chairs were tucked, and for once, nobody died. End of conference. Would you like a mint? The butler did it by narrated in a whisper, served with wit. The end. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, and tell a friend about my listening library. Your support helps us keep going.